Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Lamed. We were a little bit behind at the end of the day 2 days ago, and so we did a bit of catching up yesterday, and hopefully we'll do the rest of the catching up or virtually all of the rest of the catching up today. We are, let me share my screen and we'll get really started. We are smack in the middle of Kaftet Amud Bet. And yesterday we learned a Mishnah that detailed courtroom procedures. The Mishnah noted that it is not sufficient for witnesses to hear an admission of financial liability, meaning that if Stan and Mark were to hear me say, I owe Ken $100, that is not enough for then Ken to say, listen, I lent David $100 and he owes it to me. He admitted in front of Mark and Stan, and so as a result, he should have to pay me. That doesn't work. It's not enough for Mark and Stan to come in with that testimony. Specifically, the Mishnah noted that the defendant must admit liability to the plaintiff in front of the witnesses. So it is to Ken that I have to say, I owe you $100. And as we saw yesterday, I have to say, and I'm willing to have Mark and Stan and Mark serve as the witnesses, and so as a result, or at the very least, if Ken says, are you okay with Mark and Stan being my witnesses, I have to at least not say anything. But if I say, no, I'm not okay with that, even if Stan and Mark have already heard me say that I admit to Ken that I owe him $100, that is not enough. That is not enough. There is no liability to me because I can simply say that my admission was a joke. And so as a result, I was, playing around. So now we're going to add 2 wrinkles to the cases of admission. So instead of simply admitting, I do a Kinyan Sudar. I do a Kinyan where I lift something up to indicate the seriousness of my words, to indicate that I'm taking on the obligation. And so as a result, if that's the case, what's the story there? And then the second category is what happens if I admit in front of 3 witnesses, because 3 men could serve as a Beit Din. And so as a result, maybe we should treat my admission in front of 3 men as if it was an admission in front of a Beit Din. And so as a result, they can finalize my admission and treat it as a definitive thing. So picking up 30 lines down from the top and 28 lines up from the bottom, we are at Hoda, that's the last word on the line, Hoda bifnei shnayim. So what happens if you admit in front of 2, v'kano miyado, and you make a Kinyan from that person? So you basically, the person who's saying, so Ken says to me, listen, David, admit that you owe me $100. I say, absolutely, I owe you $100. Then he says, here, take this pen and lift it up to indicate your confirmation of that admission. And I say, sure, I'll do that. Well, now that I've done that Kinyan, then Kosvin, the people who see it, and apparently we would say, even if I never authorized Stan and Mark to serve as witnesses, but you happen to see what just happened, that I lifted up, you can write down a contract and deliver it to Ken, and Ken can thereby use that contract to enforce the debt against me. Okay, so that's the story. V'im lav, however, when he doesn't do a Kinyan, and of course, again, Ken has not gotten my authorization for Stan and Mark to serve as witnesses, ein kosvin, then he can't write it. Bifnei shlosha v'lo kanu miyado. So what happens if it was in front of 3 people, but there was no Kinyan? So again, now we can say maybe we should treat them as a Beit Din. Rav Amar Kosvin. Rav says that you do right. And Rashi explains that Shlosha, us on Beit Din, because they make it like a beit din. They have kiran hefker, and we have a concept of hefker based in hefker, that if they make something ownerless, they have the ability to do so. Malva bishtar. They have the ability to change this oral contract, because at the moment all we have is Ken has no evidence other than my other than my agreeing. So it's only an oral loan, and the three judges have the ability to turn it into a contractual agreement. And it's as if I made the agent to write it down. So that's the Rav Asi Amar. Rav Asi says no, ain kosvin. We do not write it. Okay, so that's the machlokus between Rav and Rav Asi. And then there was a case, Hava Uvda, V'chashla Rav lahada Rav Asi. And Rav seemed to be concerned about Rav Asi's opinion, and therefore he did not allow the witnesses to write the document. Okay, so we continue now with additional opinions regarding these issues. So, and maybe further qualifications. Amar Rav Ada bar Ahava ha'odisa. When it comes to writing a note of admission, zimnin kasvinan, sometimes the three witnesses can write it. V'zimnan lo kasvinan, sometimes they can't. Kenife v'yasfe lo kasvinan. If there were three people that were already sitting together before Ken came along, so then they weren't formed by Ken to serve as a beis din, and rather they just happened to be there. And I wouldn't have necessarily thought that when I was admitting in front of them that they were serving as a beit din. So therefore, he can't write anything. Kanfinu, however, if he gathered them, iu kasvinun, well, then they can write it. Okay, that's opinion. That's the next opinion. Rava Amar, Rava says, afilu kanfinun iu lo kasvinun. No. Even if they gathered them, you can't necessarily write it. Ada Amrlahu Havu alai dayane. No, he has to say, Ken needs to say in front of me that I want you to be judges over me. And Marbar of Ashi Amar, Afilu Amar Havu alai dayane. It's not even enough to say be judges over me. Lo kasvinan. Even in that situation, you don't write it. Ad kavu duchta v'shalche mizamne le'lebeidina. The three judges who Ken has set aside have to say, we're sitting here in Beit Din, and we are inviting you, David, as a litigant to talk in front of Ken. Then, if I admit it, then it would be absolutely a full-fledged admission, and I would be stuck. Okay. So that seems to be the way we paskin, and so as a result, it's not enough to just simply have three witnesses. You really need to make formal clarifications that it's actually a beit din and is in session. Now, when it comes to a situation with respect to movable property where a kinyan was performed, kosvin, we say you can write it. The im lav ain kosvin. So not only if we're talking about a where I say to Ken that I owe him $100, but even if I say to Ken from that that yes, this pen that I have is from Ken, or I borrowed it, or actually I guess I wouldn't want to say this pen because we're going to deal with the situation where I have it in my possession shortly. I say, yes, I borrowed Ken's tractor trailer, and so as a result, I owe him at least the money of a tractor trailer, or maybe better than a tractor trailer, because that's not something that you do in commerce. Let's say I borrowed a bushel of apples. So now, when I'm gonna have to pay him back that bushel of apples, so it's the money associated with that bushel of apples that I am obligating myself. And so as a result, if I admit with a kinyan that I in fact borrowed that bushel of apples, well then the witnesses who see me do that kinyan can write down that admission, which would allow an immediate collection by Ken. B'makarke v'lo kanumi v'im lav, but if I did not perform a kinyan, ein kosvin, well, then they don't have the ability to write it down. And the reason is, let's take a look at Rashi. Kosvin, daha kevan de odile di dehu. Since I've oh no, you know what? That's on the karka. So the makarke v'lo kanu miyadomai. So what happened? So we just said that if I make a kinyan, so then they can write it down, and it goes immediately to Ken. But if I don't make a kinyan, they can't write it down. What about? And that's when we talked about a bushel of apples. But what about the case of land, where Ken comes to me and says, you borrowed, my land, my plot of field, and so I want it back, and I say, yes, I did. So do we allow the witnesses in that situation to write it down? And the reason that, well, Amar Ein Kosvin, Amemer says you don't. And Marzutra Amar Kosvin. Marzutra says you do, V'hilchas a Kosvin. And the halacha is that you do. And why? That's where Rashi comes in. So the Rashi is 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 20, about almost 30 lines, 28 lines up from the bottom of the Rashi on Kaf Tet Amabet. Kosvin, daha kaven de odile didehu. Since I've admitted this land belongs to Ken, below mixera guvainu, and therefore there is no kinyan that it belongs to Ken. It already is Ken's. So as a result, there is no picking up that needs to happen to the property. There's no action that needs to happen for me to transfer it back to Ken. So the bishlama metaltali, that all we can understand when it comes to movable property, milva lahotzanitna. Stan lent me the bushel of apples in order to use and do commerce with, and he wasn't expecting me to give him the exact same bushel of apples back. Frankly, he may have been expecting me to give him the money back. V'chlov ba'almahu, and as a result, it is simply a monetary obligation. Umal ve'al peh, and therefore it is and a loan that is oral. Ria malva b'shtar is less significant, is less collectible, is inferior to a loan that is with a document. V'lo nichale la'aluma. And as a result, when I don't do a kinyan, I'm saying I don't want to strengthen Ken's hand and have people write. Aval hacha, but here, when it comes to the real property, galuye milsa ba'almahu. It is clear that when I say that the land belongs to Ken, it's his. I'm already transferring it to him. So as a result, the witnesses can write it, and that's the way we paskin, that the witnesses can write that it belongs to Ken, and he can thereby have additional evidence to bring to court. Ravina ikla de maharya. Ladamharya. So Ravina happened to be in Damharya. Amar le Rav Dimi bar Rav Huna midamharya le Ravina. So Rav Dimi asked him, Metaltale ve'isnu ba'inayhu. What happens if the thing that I say that Ken lent me is right here? So it's this pen. This is why I said I didn't like the pen example 2 seconds ago. So I say to him, here it is. This is the thing that you lent me. Now, do we say that this pen, because I said that he lent it to me, effectively, immediately, even without doing a kinyan, I'm effectively saying to Stan and to Mark that I want them to write a contract? What's the halacha? So do we say, right, as Rashi says, it's, now about 15 lines up in the Rashi, or 17 lines up in the Rashi, mi amrinan kevan de tziburin umunachen v'odile kol heka de itnahu didei havu. So because I've said it's right here, and I've admitted that it belongs to Ken, it's as if I'm saying it should go to Ken right now, which means that I want Stan and Ken to Stan and Mark to serve as witnesses and to write it down. Odilma Kevin Demilva Lahotsunditna, or maybe no. I admit that it belongs to Ken, but Ken gave me this pen in order to use and do commerce with, and I owe him the money value of the pen and not the pen itself. And so as a result, Shema Yotzia, velo nicha lemehavishtara. Maybe I'm taking it out, but I don't want them to write a contract, Ilave, on about it. But ubahoda bifnei shnei edim kamer. And we're talking about where I admit that it belongs to Ken in front of two witnesses. So Amarle Ravina answered Rav Dimi's question by saying the following: Kamakarke dummy. He says that it's like real property, meaning that the witnesses can write up the note. But Rav Ashi said no. Keva de machasre govainu lo, because Ken does not hold it, because it needs to be a kinyan needs to happen in order for Ken to take it back. So as a result, it doesn't work, and that's in fact again how we conclude. If there's a note that is signed by two witnesses that does not say Amar Lana Kisvu v'chismu v'havule, that so Stan and Mark write down a note, but it doesn't say in the note that it was that they were told to sign and to give it to Ken. So do we say that maybe they didn't know what they were doing, or do we say no, that they in fact know what they're doing? So Abaye v'Rava de Amri Tarvayu Hainu de Reish Lakish. This is consistent with the ruling of Reish Lakish, or the ruling of Reish Lakish should tell us what the halacha is here. Reish Lakish chazaka ein ha'edim kosmin al ashtar, because there's a chazaka that we say that witnesses do not sign on a contract, on a document, ela im kain nasa gadol, unless in that situation the person had reached adulthood. And Rashi tells us, what are we talking about? We're dealing with the following situation. An heir wants to sell property that he inherited. He's 18 years old. We learned in Baba Basra that he's not allowed to sell it until he turns 20. Because even though he's an adult, his mind has not fully matured, and we want to make sure that he doesn't make a humongous mistake. And so as a result, we say you have to be 20. And so if it's an inheritance, there are obviously other rules. If he's just doing business on his own, he can do whatever he wants. But if he's inherited something, the assumption is his parents didn't want him to get that. He didn't want him to just leave it to others and to sell it. They want to make sure that he really has an appreciation. And so as a result, if we have a sale document, we can presume that the witnesses know that the fact that the person is 20 years old, the seller is 20 years old if it's an inherited field. And so as a result, similarly, we can assume that the witnesses in this situation know that in order for them to be able to write anything, I have to have instructed them to write, sign, and give it to the creditor. Okay, so Maskif lo Rav Papa, the Isema, Rav Huna, Braid the Rav Yoshua. So somebody asked me, Ika midi de ana lo yadina v'safre de beidina yade. Well, 1 second. Why would you think that something that we, the rabbis, are struggling over, we're not sure whether what the halakha should be? Meaning that's why people are asking the question. So if in fact, we're struggling with it. So should the scribes, who are the ones who are going to write the note, not also potentially be mistaken? So no. They asked the scribes in Abaye's court, and they all knew the requirement, meaning that they knew that before they wrote it, because it's not the Stan and Mark who are going to write the document. They're going to go to a court scribe and have the court scribe write the document, right, and then they're going to sign it. And so as a result, the court scribe knows that they need to ask Stan and Mark, were you told by the debtor, by the person who the defendant, that you need to that they should write this, and that they should sign it, and that they should give it to the plaintiff? And if the answer is yes, well, then the scribe will write it, and if not, then no. And l'safrei de Rava v'yade, and they asked the scribes of Rava's court, and they also knew the requirement. All right, so hahu odisa da havi kasav bay. Now, if there's a note of admission, and Rashi tells us that this note of admission is dealing where there are two signatures on it, duchran piskame, but it says that this is a record of words. And that is a language that is indicative that it was a Beit Din that wrote this document, not just witnesses. The kol lishne de beidina, and they had all the other terms that you have as we turn to lamed amalaf that you would just have in a Beit Din. The lo have a kasabah, but they didn't write because there are only two signatures on it. B'mozav tlasa havina chad lesu, that there were three judges and one is no longer alive. Sava Ravina Lamemar, Ravina thought, Haino de Reish Lakish, we could say that this is also Reish Lakish, meaning all of the document looks like it was written in the proper way, but we're missing something because we don't have the third signature of the third judge. And so as a result, then maybe there was a problem. So Amrale, so we're going to try to reject it, but in the end, it looks like we're going to apply this philosophy to this situation. Because Amrle Rav Nasan Lav Bar Ami Hachi Amrina Mishmei de Rava. The following was said in front of Rava by Rava in the name of Rava. Kol ki hai gavna. Everything in that is such a case. Chayshin and based in Toan. We're worried about a court making mistakes. Now it seems like actually maybe we do have this concern, and this is the way we conclude. But Amar of Nachman Bar Yitzchak ikasav beidina. If they say we the court to lo tzarach. If they say that we're the court, meaning if they go further than just using the terminology of a court, but they actually say that we were a court, well, then we don't need to worry about it. We don't need to worry about a mistake. Vidilma based in Chatzaf, who maybe this was a based in Chatzaf. Remember that was a based in of two people. The Amar Shmuel Shnaim Shadanu Dinei Din. That according to Shmuel, when two people hear a case and judge a case, it's considered a valid judgment. Elisha Nikru based in Chatzuf, but they're chutzpahdik. They have some chutzpah in reaching that conclusion. They're indolent. They're obnoxious in their behavior, and so as a result, that's why they need to. That's why, even though their decision is a valid decision, it's not proper. Now, we don't paskin like Shmuel, and so as a result, we need to be worried that maybe the people thought that we do paskin like Shmuel, and therefore it's a mistake. So the Kasvi Bey Dina de Rabbana Ashi. No, it's where they attribute the court to a particular person. Vidilma Rabbana Debei Rav Ashi Kishmuel Sfiralahu. Maybe those rabbis also think like Shmuel. No, Diksivbo V'Amarlan Rabbana Ashi. No, it's where Rav Ashi, where we say that Rav Ashi told us to write the note, and we know that Rav Ashi specifically would not paskin like Shmuel, and so as a result, that's where we could allow it. So in general, we're going to assume that maybe it was a mistake, but if in fact we know that somebody has written in it the name of a rabbi told us to do this, and it says, and that rabbi is somebody who is not, who knows the halacha is not like Shmuel, well then maybe we would potentially allow it. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. So now, 1 second, I haven't scrolled, so my apologies. So now the Gemara is going to deal with, 1 second, hold on. Got to scroll further. Okay, now the Gemara is going to quote a brisa with 3 cases. Okay, so the first case 1, Tana Rabban, we learn in Brisa. Amar lahen echad. If somebody says, "Ani re'iti avichem shehitmin ma'os b'shida teva umigdal," I saw your father hide money in a carriage, a trunk, a closet. V'amar shel ploni hein, and he was saying to me at that time that the money belongs to somebody else, to person X. Shel meiser sheni hein, or he said that it was belonging to meiser sheni. Bias, if the hiding place was in the house, in the father's house, lo amar klum. This witness statement is meaningless. But if in fact this was a place in the field, dvarav kayamin, then his words are established. And why? Well, let's take a look at Rashi. 2 Rashis, 1, 2, 3, 7 lines, 3, 4, 5, 7 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi on Lamed Amud Aleph. Based in lo amar klum, if it's in the house, bias lo amar klum, excuse me, he hasn't said anything. Eino neman lefisha ein biyada litlan, because he has no access to the decedent's house. So as a result, he can't necessarily take it and give it to the right person. and therefore we're not going to believe him. But when it's in the field, we can believe him. Demalo l'sheker. Why should he lie? Because imrotza notlan. He could have taken it. V'notnan l'otos shehu me'id alav. And he could have given it to the right person. So the bottom line is that he should be viewed as trustworthy because effectively he has amigo. Kolalo shel davar. The general rule is kol shebiyado litlan. Anytime the witness could take it, dvarav kayamin. Well, then we're going to assume that he's correct. The aim biyado litlan, but if he doesn't have the ability to have taken it from the hiding place, so lo armor klum, then we will ignore him. So that was case number one. Case number two, very similar case. Now the heirs are directly involved with their father. Hare shiro es avi and shehit min maos bishida tevel migdal. So again, the heirs themselves are seeing their father hide the item. V'amr shel ploni hain, and he says this belongs to somebody. V'shel meiser sheni hain, or that they're meiser sheni im kemoser. If the way he's telling them is an instruction, dvarav kayamin, then we say that his words are taken at face value, and we believe him. If, however, he's deceiving them, he's saying it in a trickery way where it's not clear, lo amar klum, well, then he said nothing. Because listen to Rashi does a great job here. Im kama'arim, if it's like a trickery, shehu mityare shelo yitlam b'chayav. He's worried that they're going to take it while he's alive, meaning he's hidden his $100,000 under his mattress. Well, now, if he doesn't tell his kids that it doesn't belong to him, or that something else is going to happen, that there's some restriction on it, maybe they'll come and take some. So if that's the concern in his making of a statement, we're going to say that we won't believe him. But if, in fact, he's saying, listen, I need to protect this, etc., I want you to know, then we'll believe him. Or we're worried, Oshalo Yachaziku, maybe if they won't take it away from him, maybe he's worried, maybe Ke'ashir, they're going to think that he's super rich, Lahosif al Yitziyusav, and then they will spend more of his money. All right. If your children think that you're wealthy, they will go out and order Uber. There's a great comedian joke who jokes about that. That his kid, thinks he's wealthy and he orders Uber X. All right. Anyway, so that was case number two. Case number three. So again, where there's a question about money, that the person is concerned about money that was left him, but he doesn't know where it is. Uval bal hachalom v'amerlo, and the person, the master of dreams, but basically his father comes to him in a dream. Kach v'kachein, this is where it is. This is how much it is. B'makom plonihein, this is where it is. Shal Meiser Sheni, but it's Meiser Sheni. V'zehaya Masa, and all of the previous things are exactly what happened. Namely, he found the amount of money that he thought that he was told in the dream. He found it in the location where it is. So is that enough to say that maybe this dream is real and is the truth? No. The Imru, we say about it, Divrei Chalomot, lo ma'alen v'lo maridim. No, dreams cannot raise or lower something. They don't change the status of anything. And so as a result, you keep the money and you don't have to treat it as Meiser or as Meiser in this case. Okay, so Shnayim. So we said in the Mishnah, we said that when two judges say not liable and one judge says liable, then the defendant is not liable. So now the Gemara discusses how the verdict is written when it is not unanimous. So Shnayim omrim zak, we said in our Mishnah, the two said that you're not liable. Michtav hechi kasvi. How do they write it? Rabbi Yochanan Amar, opinion number one, Zakai. They just write that he's not liable. Reish Lakish Amar, Ploni uploni mizakin, uploni mechayev. That this is based on the reading of the Masoras Hashas, that the first two judges say that you're not liable, and one judge says that you are liable. Rabbi Elazar Amar, and if you're saying, well, 1 second, I thought we aren't supposed to give that information out, we'll get there. Rabbi Elazar Amar, Rabbi Elazar says, Midivreya nizdaka ploni, that from their words, it turned out that he was not liable. And from their words is useful because it highlights the fact that there was a debate about the issue. And so as a result, that's, as Rashi says, mashma shahaya machlokas beinehen. The implication of their words says that there was an argument, umitoch divreyen nizdaka, but because of who said what, we end up saying that he is not liable. So my benai, what's the difference between these three opinions? So we're going to offer three possibilities as to what the difference is, but we're going to reject the first two, and the final one will be the correct one. Ika benaihu, one could say that maybe the difference is leshalumi ihu manasa bahadaihu. The question is if it turns out that the judges made a very big error. It was such a big error that they actually have to pull out of their pocket the money and pay back the defendant. Okay. So what happens in that situation? Do we say that the third judge who said that you're not liable doesn't have to pay, or does he have to pay? So according to Lamanda Amar Zakai Mishalem, according to the one who says that you just view it as Rabbi Yochanan, who says that you just say the person's not liable. So the implication is that all three judges are responsible for the decision, and therefore the dissenting judge needs to pay. And according to Reish Lakish, who says that the two judges are say that you name the two judges and you say that they are say not liable, and the third judge says you are liable. Lo mashalem. Well, of course, the third judge doesn't have to pay a share of the restitution. So as a result, but Ulamanda Amar Zakai Mishalem. But 1 second. Are you telling me that we're going to actually have the dissenting judge pay? Leimalahu, he should be able to tell the other judges. Ila didi tsaisisun. If you would have listened to me, atunami lo shalmisun. You wouldn't have had to pay anything. You should have just listened to my arguments in the courtroom, and you would have been fine. But instead, you didn't listen to me, and now you owe the money. I don't. So the question isn't whether the judge who says that the person was not liable is liable for the error of the court, but rather, do the two judges who are liable, do they have to pay the full amount, or do they pay just their proportional amount? So if it's a $150 verdict, do they pay $100, which is 2/3, or do they pay $150? Do they pay on behalf of the person who said not liable? So, Lamanda Amar Zakai Mishalme, according to the Rabbi Yochanan, who says that you just say one opinion, so of course they would have to pay the dissenting party's judge's share. Lamanda Amar Ploni Uploni Mizakinu Ploni Mechayev, well then, Lo Mishalme, you wouldn't have to pay in that situation. So Reish Lakish would say you don't have to pay. But that doesn't work either. Ulamanda Amar Zakai Mishalme, but once again, according to the one who says that you don't have that you're not that they say that you say zakai, and therefore you have to pay the dissenting share. The lame roulette. Why can't they tell the dissenting judge, Ilav at bahadayin? If you hadn't been with us, lo havasalik dina midei, we wouldn't have had any liability because we wouldn't have been a valid court. If you would have even just said, I don't know, we wouldn't have been a valid court. And so as a result, maybe we shouldn't have to pay anything at all. So those are the three. So that's also too much of a problem. And so we're going to now offer our third and final approach. Here is the situation. Mishum lo telech rachel ba'mecha. Whoa, when we said in our Mishnah that we don't want somebody to be a gossip bearer. So then Rabbi Yochanan Amar Zakai, Rabbi Yochanan says that we say that you're not liable, and we just say that we attribute the decision to everyone. Mishum lo selech rachel, because we don't want to tell anybody who judged what. Reish Lakish Amar Ploni Uploni Mizakin Uploni Mechayev Mishum de Mechsev Gashikra. No, because if you were to write that the decision was not liable, it's almost like you're lying because you're suggesting that the decision was unanimous. Rabbi Lazar, Islay Damar, Islay Damar. Rabbi Lazar says, yeah, we got to be concerned about rechilus, we got to be concerned about gossiping, and we have to be concerned about not appearing like you're lying. And so therefore, Hilka Kasvi Hachim Divrayim Nizdakaponi. And that's why he says that you need to write that this is the decision through their words. And that is how we seem to conclude. Okay, so Gamru es hadavar hayu machnisin. So we said that at the end, when the judges had reached a verdict, they bring somebody back into the court to hear the verdict. Now, we explained it, as we will end this Gemara, by noting that it refers to the litigants.
Right.
But right now, the Gemara is wondering, who does it refer to? Leman, who is it talking about? Ilem lebali dinin, if you say that it refers to the litigants, hasam kaimi, but weren't they there the whole time? Meaning they may be, at least at the moment, we assume that they're there during the judge's deliberation. Elala Edim, so it must refer to the Edim. Kiman, and who is it like? Delo Rabbi Nassan. The fact that you bring both Edim in together shows that it's not like Rabbi Natan, because what does Rabbi Natan say? Tanya la'olam ein edusin mitzdarafis, that we say that really two witnesses who come in at different times do not do not count together unless they see the event at the same time. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha Omer, afilu bezach arzeh. No, they don't have to see the exact same thing. They can see evidence of the same thing. For example, if they say, if Stan sees me admit to Ken that I owe him $100 on Monday, and Mark sees it on Tuesday, and in both cases I gave them authorization to serve as a witness, well, then they would be able to come in together and say that they are testifying to the same thing. Ve'ein edusin kayemes bebeis, and similarly, the second argument in this brisa, which is the one that's relevant for us, that if you have two witnesses in court, that they cannot test it's they don't count unless they come in together. Rabbi Nassan Omer, no, shomin dvarav shel zeh hayom, shomin es dvarav. No, they don't need to come in at exactly the same time. If one can make it on Monday and the other can make it on Tuesday, as long as they're testifying to the exact same action, well, then they are going to be accepted. And we and the Gemara recognizes that we actually paskin like Rabbi Natan, which strengthens this question as to how can our Mishnah not be consistent with him. So the Gemara instead says, no, you don't have to say that our Mishnah is talking about witnesses, but rather, la'olam lebali dinin. Really, we could talk about litigants. And of course, that was how we understood the Mishnah in the first place. For Rabbi Nechemia, and it's all Rabbi Nechemia, the Tanya, because we have a brisa where Rabbi Nechemia says, Rabbi Nechemia Omer, kach hayaminik shel nikiyei hadas shebrushalaim. Here's what the wise people, the clean thinking people, the clear thinking people in Yerushalayim would do. Machnisun lebali dinim v'shomin divrehen. First, they bring in the litigants and they listen to what they say. And then they bring in the witnesses and hear what they have to say. And then you send everybody out of the courtroom. And then the judges debate, and the bottom line is they reach a conclusion. We could even include the words in parentheses. And then when they finish, they bring them back. Bahatanya, okay, and so as a result, everybody is brought back into the courtroom. So that shows that it's about the litigants. Bahatanya, 1 second, Gamru esa davar machnisin esa edim. 1 second, we have a separate brisa that says specifically you bring back the witnesses. So hahidalo Rabbi Natan. That brisa doesn't have to be like Rabbi Natan, but our Mishnah, which we really want to be the halacha, we're going to say is like Rabbi Natan. So now we're going to analyze the two pieces of our brisa. We're going to first analyze and understand the first argument in the brisa, and then we'll understand the second one. Gufa la'olam ein edusan mitztaref ad sheyiru shteihem be'echad ke'echad. You have to have the two people see the same event at the same time. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha Omer, Afil Bezer Chesed. No, they don't have to see it at the same time. They can see one after the other. But my Kamiflagi, what are they arguing about? You could say that they're arguing about the way you understand a pasuk in the Torah, or you could say that they're disagreeing about a logical issue. If you want to say that it's a logical disagreement, amona de kamasid high, lo kamasid high. They're arguing about the fact that maybe you could say that the $100 that Stan is testifying about is not the same $100 that Mark is testifying about. Umana de kamasid high, lo kamasid high, and the $100 that Mark is testifying is not the $100 that Stan is testifying about, the idach, and so therefore they cannot join. But the other opinion is, who says, Rabbi Yeshua ben Karchel, who says that we allow them to combine, $100 is $100. It doesn't make a difference which $100, and so as a result, let this one testify about this $100 and let that one testify about $100, and it's still the same $100 because the bottom line is that I owe the $100. Or you could say that the argument isn't about a logical question, but really it's about a verse. That we're going to have two verses here. The first verse is that we see that a witness either saw or knew. V'tanya mimashma shenemar lo yakum aid. So there are two psukim. One pasuk is in Vayikra Parakeh Pasuk Aleph. That's the pasuk for who aid o yada. And it's talking about the fact that if you know testimony and you don't testify, that's a bad thing. And the second pasuk is lo yakum eid echad. We say that you don't allow one witness to stand, testimony to stand. So in connection with the lo yakum eid echad, we can understand lo yakum eid should be enough. Because aid is singular, we know that it's one witness. Mal Talmud Omer echad. So zeh bana'av. So actually, the usage of the word echad in that situation tells us an important point. Kol makom shenemar aid. Whenever it says a single witness, harei kan shnayim. It really refers to two witnesses. Achi yifarei l'cha hakasav echad. Unless the pasuk specifically says echad there as well. So therefore, when we go back to our original pasuk, v'hu aid o ra o yada, that he's a witness and he saw or he knew, we're talking about two witnesses because it does not say eid echad. So and so as a result, that's the way one person says. And the reason that the Torah uses singular is because the Torah wants the two witnesses to have seen the event together. V'idach, and the other person says no. V'hu aid o ra o yada. No. Listen to the nature of the verse. The verse says that the person saw or knew. Well, the implication is it doesn't make a difference how he became aware of the knowledge. Mikol makom. And so as a result, I'm not going to use this as a verse to tell us that in fact they all have to see it at the same time. And so that's Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha's perspective. And so that is the explanation of the first machlokas in the Brisa. Now we go to the second. Be'ene dusan miskayemes bevestin. Their testimony won't be valid, that they actually have to come in together. Rabbi Nassan Omar, Shomin Dvarav Shalzeh Hayom, because Shayavu Chaver Lamachar, Shomin Livarav. And Rabbi Natan says, no, listen, we'll listen to each testimony when it comes. We'll listen to one on one day and the other on the other day. So, b'mai kamifliki, what are they arguing about? And guess what? Just like the first argument, so to the second argument. You could say they're arguing about logic. You could say they're arguing about the understanding of a pasuk. That when it comes to one, the logic of the Tanakama, who says that you need to testify together, because the concept is that when you have the witnesses come in, they are a single witness only allows a shvua of liability. Meaning, if Stan comes in and says, I know because David admitted in front of me, or I saw the loan happen to that David borrowed $100 from Ken, so then the only thing that I'm obligated in that situation is to make an oath. I'm not obligated for money. Lo mamona lo asi. But for money, I'm not going to be obligated. V'idach, And so as a result, if you have two single witnesses, according to the Tanakama, all that I'm liable for is an oath. But the idach atu ki asu bahade adade bechad puma kamasade. But 1 second, the response is from a logical perspective. When the two witnesses come in, when Mark and Stan come in together and testify, do they testify at the same time? Do they have only one mouth? Meaning, element starfin lahu. They are always going to testify a few moments apart. So hakanami litzarifnu. So let them combine their testimony. So as a result, that's the story. So that's the logical argument. The ibai is same akra, or you could say that it's an argument about a verse. Im lo yagid v'nasa avono. That the end of that pasuk in Perek Hey, pasuk Aleph of Vayikra, it says, and if he doesn't testify, he's going to sin. So the first part of that verse was about witnessing and knowledge and how you came to obtain the information. And the second part of that verse is about testimony. And so as a result, everybody agrees Karabanan de Pligi Ale de Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha. Both of these views agree with the rabbis who argue with Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha. Meaning that you need to have witnesses testify to the same event. And what they're arguing about is, do we connect the two concepts and say that whatever you require for witnessing the event, you require for testifying in court? And so, according to the Tanakama, we say yes. Anytime you have to witness, which is always, you always have to witness the same event. So therefore, you always have to testify together. Whereas Rabbi Natan says, no, just because we say that you have to witness the same event doesn't mean that you have to testify. Okay, right? Right? The Tanakama says we connect the two, and therefore they both have to come together. And Rabbi Natan says, no, we don't. Okay. So Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim, haba mishtaked alei to Rabbi Yossi. We're now going to get into the halacha question. Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim was trying to get the Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, lemismechei. He was trying to get smicha for Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Chanina. Below kamistayel milsa, but hadn't been successful. Yom Echad Havi Yosef Kamei to Rabbi Yochanan. One day he was sitting, both of them were sitting in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Amar lo, Rabbi Yochanan asked the question, Mi Ika de Yada Halacha Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha lo. Does anybody know whether the halacha is like Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha? Amar le, Rabbi Shimon ben Yakim. Rabbi Shimon ben Yakim said, Din Yada. This guy knows, meaning Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Chanina. Amar le. So Rabbi says, Lema Izu. So let him say what the story is. Amar le. So Rabbi Shimon ben Yakim said, 1 second, Lismechei Mar Beresha. Give him smicha first. Samche, so they gave him smicha. Amarle, so he asked again the question, B'ni Emor li Ketzat Shamat, what did you hear, my son? Amarle, Kashamati, this is what I heard. Shemoda Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha, Rabbi Natan. Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha agrees with Rabbi Natan. Unfortunately, that doesn't really impress Rabbi Yochanan. Amar, Lezehu tzrachti, for that I needed? I knew that on my own. Hashda Umar Ika Bahade Hadade. When it comes to Rabbi Natan, he says that you need to actually witness them together. Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha lo ba'inan. And so Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha, who says that you don't need to see it together, Hagada mi boy, do you have any question that you don't have to testify at the same time? Of course you don't have to testify at the same time. So Amar Lei, nonetheless, Rabbi Yochanan says, Hoil ba'alita lo tered. Once I've given you smicha, I'm not going to take it away. Amar Rabbi Zera shmamina gaver rabba kevan de istamech samech. Once a person gives smicha, it's given. There's nothing to do about it once a great person does so. Oh. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to continue to explore what the halacha is. So Amar Rabbi Chia bar Avin Amarav halacha Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha. So the halacha is like Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha. Sorry, I didn't scroll. And yes, so now we're on the screen. Okay, so the halacha is like Rabbi Shua ben Karka. Bain bekarkos, bain b'metalton. Doesn't make a difference whether they're talking about land or movable property. Ula Amar, Ula says, halacha Rabbi Yoshua ben Karka bekarkos, avalo b'metalton. The halacha is like Rabbi Shua ben Karka when it comes to real property, but not movable property. Amarle Abaye halacha miklal de pligi. 1 second. Abaye says to Ula, 1 second, you're saying that the halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karka with respect to real property. That suggests that people disagree with this and say that the halacha is not like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karka when it comes to real property. V'hamar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rabbi Huna, Amar Rav, but we have a statement in the name of Rav, Modim Chachamim LeRabbi Yeshua ben Karka be'edus Karka. When it comes to testifying about real property, the witnesses certainly can see the things at different times because they're seeing it about the same property. There's no question. What's the problem with Rabbi Yeshua ben Karka? The problem with Rabbi Yeshua ben Karka's position is that maybe the $100 that Stan saw is not the $100 that Ken saw. And so that Mark saw. And so as a result, we have to be worried that it's not that they're not testifying to the same thing. But when we're talking about the same piece of property, well, then even if Mark sees it on day 1 and Stan sees it on day 2, it's fine because they are all testifying about clearly the same piece of property. Okay, Vitani Rav Idi Bar Avin, Benazikin Debe Karna, and Rav Idi Bar Avin similarly taught a brisa, Modim Chachamim LeRabbi Yoshua ben Karka, that the rabbis agree to Rabbi Yoshua ben Karka when it comes to Edus Bechor, when it comes to testimony regarding a firstborn animal, Ube Edus Karka, when it comes to land, Ube Edus Chazaka, and when it comes to the establishing a Chazaka with respect to land, V'chein Bebein Shibabat, and similarly when it comes to a boy or a girl. Now, we're going to say, what is that boy or girl question? We're going to explain that in just a moment. But Gavra Karamis, 1 second, but why are you asking Abaye? We can have a disagreement. Mar Savar Pligi, Ula says that they argue, and Mar Savar Lo Pligi, and Rabbi Abba and Rabbi Idi say that they don't argue. So it doesn't make a difference. So my v'chein shibabein v'shibabat, what is the story of when it comes to a boy or a girl? So ilema echad omer achas begaba echad omer achas b'charesa. If we're talking about a situation where one witness says that I saw one hair in the front area of and the one says no, I saw it in the back area. Actually, it's reversed in the order in the Gemara. The one says I saw it in the back area, and one says I saw it in the front area. Hi chatzi davar v'chatzi edusu. So ha chatzi davar v'chatzi edusu. This is, they're each testifying to half of what's necessary. Even if they were to come together and testify about a single hair, they wouldn't work. Ella echad omer shtayim begaba. 2 people say that they saw that 2 hair. One person says I saw 2 hairs on her back, and one says echad omer shtayim bechrisa, and one says I saw 2 hairs on her front. And as a result, that's the testimony that we will allow 2 separate individuals to come together and be considered a single testimony. So the Amar Rav Yosef, back to the discussion of what the halacha is. Ana amina mishmei de'ula. I think that what Ula said is halacha Rabbi Yoshua ben Karka, bein bekarkos, bein b'metaltalin. That the halacha is like Rabbi Yoshua ben Karka when it comes to real property and movable property. For Abanan to Asum Mechuza Amre Rabbi Zera Mishmei Derav, whereas the rabbis who came from Chuza said that it was said in the name by Zera in the name of Rav, but Karkos in the halacha is like Rabbi Yoshua ben Karka Korcha with respect to property of aloba matalton, but not with respect to movable property. So real property, yes, but movable property now. So now the Gemara is going to quote a statement of Rav that demonstrates that he does not hold like Rabbi Yoshua ben Karka when it comes to movable property. But for that quote and for the related discussion, please stay tuned to tomorrow's daf. And God willing, tomorrow, hopefully, I'm going to do my best. Hopefully, we will finish the 3rd parak of Sanhedrin. So looking forward to continuing our learning together. I'll note for the benefit of those that are here that God willing, next week we will be only Zoom, and Dove is going to cover for me because I've got to help my parents with something, and so I'm going to be away next week. But God willing, thank you. God willing, we will be back in person a week from Wednesday. But tomorrow, God willing, we'll be in person again. I'll share that reminder again tomorrow. Looking forward to continuing our learning together.
Yes.
Have a wonderful day, everybody.
You too, Will.
Have a good day.